You are listening to Parenting Our Future with certified parent coach Robbin McManne, author of The Yelling Cure and founder of Parenting for Connection. My podcast is all about providing you with the tools and solutions you need in your parenting so you can create the family you always wanted. For more information on my book and other resources, check out yellingcurebook.com. Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Robbin McManne here and welcome to Parenting Our Future. Today I have another really special guest. Her name is Laurie Palau and she's the author of the book Hot Mess, a practical guide to getting organized. She's the host of a popular weekly podcast, This Organized Life, and is the founder of Simply Be Organized, a lifestyle company helping people live simply and work smarter. She has also been featured in national publications, including Real Simple and the New York Times. So she's kind of a big deal. I just want you guys all to know. She's also a self-described homebody, a coffee lover like me. She lives in Bucks County, Pennsylvania with her husband, Josh, 2 daughters, and dog, Jeter. Love it so much. Welcome, Laurie. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, it's awesome. Now, we are talking about how to get organized, how to stay organized, how to be organized, even when there is chaos all around us, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I think now more than ever, we are forced to be staring at the same 4 walls. So yeah, the level of kind of like, I'm going to go and plan something, a distraction outside so I don't have to deal with it, isn't something that we're able to do at this current time. So a lot of people are struggling.
Yeah. And so I was joking originally when the quarantine happened that I'm going to have the most organized house in the entire world because I have time. Turns out I don't have as much time as I thought I would have, and it hasn't happened quite the same way. But there definitely are some boxes and bags in my garage that are going to go to Goodwill as soon as they are willing to take that stuff. But, in general, clutter does represent a lot of different things, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I always say to people that clutter is really the symptom. It's not the problem. And trying to identify kind of the root cause of it, and which is going to look different for everybody. And that's a lot of what I do. I always say I like to pretend like I'm a therapist. I'm not, but I'm like a little clutter counselor for people to really unpack kind of where it came from, what it stemmed from, and why we either choose to take action or not, procrastinate or, whatever the situation is. And I think a lot of people, when, we first went under quarantine, I think a lot of people felt like, oh, I'm going to use this time as that reclaimed time to clean that closet or pantry or garage or whatever. And then the reality set in of what our new normal was, and actually the added responsibilities, especially for anybody that's listening, that's a parent, which I'm assuming is, the majority of your community. Now, not only do we have the everyday expectations that are on our plate, and we may have had to adapt them, but now we need to take on the role of educator and full-time cook and cleaner and all of the things. So like you said, when we thought we were actually going to have more time to tackle these things, our time, our actual time is being sucked, as well as just the mental drain that this has taken on us.
Absolutely. And the thing is that you listed all of our new jobs, plus we're therapists, plus new to me is a barber. I'm now going to open up a hair cutting studio here in my house. All of those things that we haven't experienced before. And it does take us away from those jobs. And this school, this homeschooling is no joke. And for all of us who never signed up for homeschool, it's no joke. And look, what I want to say to everybody listening, and if you are connected with me on other platforms, I am really passionate about saying this, and that is that this quarantine does not have to look perfect. You do not have to have a quarantine plan. Maybe if we had 6 months to plan for this time, we could do it differently, but this was a surprise. This was something that we never could have conceptualized in our minds. And in talking to a client just yesterday, she said, look, I want this time to be about connection, but she has 4 kids. She runs her own business. How can this be about connection when she's got to school 4 kids, run her own business, also cook full-time, clean full-time, organize the family full-time, all of those things. And we don't have the same activities to do and that sort of thing. We don't have those same things, but there's still other things that are going on, and we don't have to do this perfectly. I don't want anyone to look back and say, oh geez, I should have taken advantage of that quarantine in a better way. No, it's okay. You're doing the best you can. We're in survival mode right now because there is a threat of danger of being sick. This is real. And so that anxiety is also something we're dealing with too, which is where the therapy part comes in. But at the same time, we're feeling it too. And we know that stress is contagious. So if we're feeling it, our kids are feeling it, and that shows up in their behavior as well. So it's, there's so much about this time right now that we've taken and added more pressure to ourselves, right? But what I know, and the reason why you're here talking today, is because look, the reality is we've got to still parent our kids. It's okay to still expect and require them to show up and do things that they normally would do, right? We don't want to now just throw parenting out the window. We want to say, hey, look, I still need you to keep your room clean. I would still like you to do this and that, take the garbage out and make sure that, you clean your plate after you've used it. So tell me, if I was to say to my child, I need you to go clean your room, something as simple as that, what is your take on that? How do you tell us to do that?
Okay, so this is a great question, and one that I love, because I think that, well, first of all, I know that most parents have the best of intentions and want to be raising functional members of society, right? We want our kids to learn these life skills.
Mm-hmm.
And there are things that we just oftentimes take for granted that our kids should know, just like as parents. And people think that we should just know things, but organizing is a learned skill, just like cooking or knowing how to properly exercise or whatever else you want to do, right? And so some people are naturally more gifted, right? Yes. Are there people that can just come up and play the piano with never taking a lesson? Sure, there are. But most people need to have instruction. They need to have a roadmap. And so being able to kind of set that I think is really, really important. So one of the things that I just want to kind of say before I get into the specifics is the information I'm going to share is universal. So this is not just applicable under quarantine. This is not just applicable in a pandemic or a crisis. These are great life skills and tools that you can use at any point in any different area. But specifically when we're talking to them about cleaning your kid's room or cleaning the playroom or an area, one of the things that happens is I see a lot of generalization. And what I find is it's really important, especially with kids, to be very specific, because my definition of what a clean room looks like is very different than what a 7-year-old, and even take a 7-year-old, you could take 5 7-year-olds and it's all going to look different. But to them, that could mean, okay, I just don't want my toys on the floor, so I'm going to push everything under my bed. Or, I'm going to throw everything in the closet and shut the door, which to me is not really cleaning or organizing, as I'm using my air quotes. So I think one of the first things is to be specific. And so if you know that I'd like you to pick up all your dirty clothes and put them in the hamper. Like that's a specific task. It's definable. It's actionable. I think you should chunk it, not give them everything, because think about yourself as an adult. Organizing, actually, I want to take a step back. Is that okay? Like I want to just take a step back. So one of the things that I talk about, and I talk about it a lot on my show and also in my book, is what I call the 5 clutter pitfalls. Okay. And I just want to walk you through them, and then we can always come back and unpack them, but I just want to kind of walk through them. So they're procrastination, overwhelm, guilt, indecision, and time, right? So there are a variety of reasons why clutter will accumulate, but usually what stands in our way are at least one of those 5 clutter pitfalls, okay? So if you can start to identify kind of where you are and like looking at your own patterns of behavior, are you somebody that, procrastination is, I just don't want to deal with it, so because there's something else I'd rather be doing. That is one area. But sometimes it's overwhelm. And a lot of times our kids are overwhelmed as much as we are. And so we procrastinate as a result of the overwhelm. And the same goes true with indecision. If you don't know what you're supposed to do or where something's supposed to go, most people have a fear of making a mistake. So if you are not sure what to do with something, say you got something in the mail as an adult, right? You get mail and you're like, do I need to keep this? Do I need to file it? I'm not sure. Should I hold on to it? A lot of people will just put it in this pile, I'll get to it later, because there's a fear of making a mistake. So there's this indecision. I don't know what to do with it. So I'm just going to put this here in this temporary holding pattern. And before long, the clutter will accumulate. And it's not out of laziness. It's not necessarily out of any other reason, as you're just not sure. So now let's look at that and apply it to a kid. So they have this messy room. So maybe they don't know what the home is, or they don't know the method. So something as simple as there's clothes on the floor or Legos, right? If you have that. So saying a specific action of, I want you to take all your dirty clothes and I want you to put them in the hamper. That's a specific action this is what you do. If you have a defined bin for your Legos or your toys, I want you to pick your Legos up off the floor and put them in the Lego bin. That's a specific tactic that you're asking them to do. A task, they could do it, they could check it off, like brushing your teeth or making your bed. So saying, I want you to go up and clean your room, that might be, okay, I'm just going to shove all the clothes and the Legos somewhere. But being organized, to me, is about the ease of retrieval. And when I talk about reducing clutter, and one of the many benefits of reducing clutter is how quickly can I find what I'm looking for, not how quickly can I put something away. Because anybody can take something, and I'm sure you might be guilty of it, or your spouse might be guilty of it, or your kid, where like someone's coming over and I'm going to take all this stuff that's sitting on the counter and shove it in a drawer, right? Yeah. But so then the clutter is gone from your visible view. But then the question is, when you go to need that fill in the blank, how long is it going to take you to find it? And it's about reclaiming time. That's really what it is. And that's a hard thing for a kid to understand.
I just want to stop for a second. That is so cool what you just said. Like, like ease of retrieval. Like, I just want to think about that for a minute, because the reality is that that's going to save you time later. I'm all about the putting the effort in so that it saves you time later. Like that, I want to just sit with that for a second. That is really smart. There is, and what it's bringing up for me, it's reminding me of this quote that I saw, which is especially true for me, that I get more cleaning done in the 3 minutes before someone's about to come over than I do all week, right? And there is, and my husband and I refer to them as heaps. We're like, I got a heap in the pantry. I gotta sort out, which is papers, which is school, like class pictures, some cords that I don't know what they're for, maybe some old birthday cards. Like there is this like heap of stuff. And you're right. I look at it and I look at procrastination, overwhelm, indecision, guilt and time, those 5 pitfalls. And I think, shoot, I am definitely guilty of that. It's probably overwhelm. It's probably indecision, but that leads to my procrastination. So yes, I totally get you there. And I never knew that I was doing those 5 things, but I am. And I don't know what to do with stuff. You're absolutely right.
And so there's so much in like society about wanting to not label people and not label things. But I think in some regard, like a label is helpful, because then it gives you permission to say, okay, so here's the problem. It's not an excuse for it, but now that we've identified this is where I'm struggling, now we can develop a strategy to work through it.
So maybe it's not labeling it as much as it is naming it.
Correct. I
right?
like that.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I'm just going to name it. Like, look, I am too overwhelmed to keep my heap organized. Or I'm too tired to keep my heap organized. And here's the thing. If I, mom, can't keep organized, then how can I expect my kids to? Because I haven't modeled for them what that means. Because like you said, some people can sit at a piano and play it, but let's be honest, nobody really, like the percentages of that is next to nothing. So most of us, I think we can say in general terms, we're not taught how to do it. All we do is what our parents did, right? What was modeled for us. Who knows how good they were? They might have been stuck in guilt, time constraints, overwhelm, indecision, all of those things too, right?
Yeah. And I mean, we had talked offline about it, and you look at generationally, the expectations of things that our parents had to do, or, I wasn't involved in 4 different travel teams and this and that and the other in terms of extracurriculars. So it's not just the added expectations as parents, but the added expectations on kids and what their time and their bandwidth is. Mm-hmm. So I think giving them this roadmap of what it looks like is very freeing. And as parents, I know I've been guilty of saying, let me just do, especially when my kids were smaller, like it's just, let me just do it because it's quicker. Yep. And I want to get it done, and it'll be done right, or it'll be done the way I want it. And let me just get it done. But in the long run, you're not giving them those life skills to teach them. So in terms of modeling the behavior of putting in the work on the front end to work with them and say, this is how we're going to do it. Mm-hmm. And again, saying, and I always use the example of, a bookshelf or a bin, and this is how we do it. And I don't know if you want me to kind of walk you through on a top line, like what I do.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. So I use what I call the ESP model. It's something that I just thought it was easy and catchy. And it stands for empty, sort, and purge. So it's the ESP model. And what it means is you're going to empty a space. Now, let me put a disclaimer out there. That doesn't mean you have to, and this can go for adults and kids, but it's a great thing. Kids will remember the ESP. I do a lot of talking to like assemblies at schools and things of that nature. They will remember the ESP. It doesn't mean we're going to ESP their entire room. It means we're going to ESP a shelf. It means we're going to ESP we're going to ESP a bin of toys. So a manageable area. And if you're talking about an adult, you don't necessarily ESP your entire kitchen. You do a cupboard or a drawer, right? So you want to have those small little wins under your belt. And so what happens is you empty the space so you can see the clean you could see the clean space. It gives you visually this white space to look at.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you do is you create 4 piles. The 4 piles are keep, donate, recycle, and relocate. Now that relocate pile is like the key caveat, because a lot of times people will hold on to things because they don't necessarily use them, play with them, wear them, but they're not quite ready to part with them.
Mm-hmm.
And there needs to be that in between.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the relocate pile could be something as simple of, your kid was, brought a dish up to his or her bedroom. They were having a snack. Not that I'm a proponent of having food in the bedroom, but let's just say, so the dish or the bowl or whatever doesn't belong there. It's not going to be recycled. It's not going to be donated. It's going to be relocated. So you start creating that pile. But the relocate could also be a keepsake, something that your kid, and again, we have to manage the volume of it. But the relocate could be something of like, this is something that I really loved. It was a keepsake from when I was a kid, and I'm going to relocate it. And as parents, it's our job to work with our kids as opposed to kind of ripping it out from them and telling them, this is, I'm getting rid of it, to say, okay, we're going to relocate this. And if you don't play with it in 3 months, we're going to get rid of it. Or, we're going to donate it, not get rid of it, but we're going to give it to less fortunate kids, or we're going to do something else with it. So if you say, these are your 4 piles, and you could do this with kids as early as like 2 and 3 with pictures, and you could color code them. So even if they're not reading words, you could say the red pile, do like anything, put out a piece of construction paper, and anything that we're keeping is going to go, on green. Anything that we're getting rid of is going in red, whatever. You can make it super, super simple, and you can create games, right? And again, this depends on your child, but if you have 2 young children, you could say, okay, we're going to do like an organizing race. Let's see who can get through this the quickest, right? And that
organizing race, yay!
Because it removes the ability for them to kind of ruminate on things, because how many times have the kids, gone, oh my gosh, I love this. And meanwhile it's been sitting in the bottom of a toy bin for 6 months, So I think it gives them this like, well, we're going to make it fun, and we're going to do this. So there's different ways that you can do it for appropriateness for, per age, and knowing your kids. But I think, again, the key is to give them the tools. This is what we're doing, this is what we're doing, and this is how we're going to do it. We're going to do and listen, this is the system that I use. If you have a system that works for you better, go for it. This isn't the only way. I don't believe in a one size fits all. But if it's consistent and they know, like my kids drank this Kool-Aid their whole lives, right? So this is what they know. But they will say, if I'm like, listen, I need you to go upstairs and ESP your shoes. She knows what that means. Like, obviously it's like a separate little language, but they will be able to do that. And it's helpful to navigate. So you can set a timer and say, listen, I want you to go upstairs for 15 minutes and work on that. So that's a task that you can use if you're in quarantine or out of quarantine.
You are currently listening to the Parenting Our Future podcast. I'm parent coach Robbin McManne. If you're enjoying this podcast, please share it with someone who you think might also need to hear this message. And please don't forget to subscribe, and I would be grateful if you gave me a 5-star rating on iTunes. If you'd like to connect with me, all my details are in the show notes, and for a copy of my book, go to yellingcurebook.com. Now back to the show. I think that's really great. I really liked that, the ESP. I like the 4 piles as well. And I like, so what I like is, you're teaching your kids this at the same time, which are really, really important skills to bring along with us. And if we're not really ever taught how to do this, right? Like, this is what I'm saying, like cleaning and parenting or clutter, there's so many parallels to link the two where, nobody's really ever taught us. So you, in a way, you're with your strategy here, with your 5 pitfalls, ESP, these four piles, and just organizing things is a great place for parents to start too, and then teach their kids as they go, right? And the thing is, we have more stuff than ever now, don't we? And it's funny too, because even when you were saying how if you're going to ESP a box of toys, all of a sudden your kids like find stuff that they want to play with. That happened to us all the time. When I would get frustrated with my kids, I'd take like the one bin of toys and just dump it upside down. And then all of a sudden they were like happy for like an hour. It was great. It was great.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah. And I think, again, a lot of times because the parents can't see the forest through the trees, that anxiety is like, it's like passing the clutter torch, like think of it's like, just deal with it. Just deal with it, because you're stressed at seeing this pile. And so you want to put that off on them. And so it's, again, it's understanding and knowing also what battles to pick. I think as parents, and especially in this crazy time, there's certain things, every family's going to have their non-negotiables, right? Some parents, you have to make your bed every day, right? I'm a big believer. I like a made bed, but for somebody else, it's not as important. Something else might be more important. So kind of look at your non-negotiables, because I think what happens a lot of times is, and you can apply this to probably a lot of areas of parenting, is if you are picking every battle with your kid, they're going to tune you out and not listen to any. So like sit down with your spouse and figure out what's really like, what are like the non-negotiables of our family? What are our, I always said, like, this is Team Palau. Like, this is a team sport, people. Yeah. And everyone's got to put in. And, as my kids got older, I allowed them to have more freedom in their room in terms of if it's messier. I didn't stay on top of them the way that I did when they were younger. There were different battles that I wanted to pick. Now, did that mean that they could just go, hog wild? Absolutely not. And I did have my breaking point. But for me, what was always a non-negotiable were the common spaces. Like, listen, you want to have, if the clutter on the floor doesn't bother you in your room and you're a teenager, I don't have to go in there, right? But guess what? You're going to put your shoes away and you're going to hang up your backpack, and you're not going to leave toys out on the floor or your stuff, whatever it is, in the common areas. So, understanding kind of and defining what those boundaries are and why, I think is really important.
I think it's important too for parenting on the whole. And really what you're talking about is setting up your family values and then the boundaries around those values. And if one of your values is cleanliness, then what is the boundary around that? Like one of the boundaries is that you do clean your bed, or you make your bed every day, that you do keep stuff off the floor. Or if you are a teenager, and look, we want to give teenagers a little bit of slack, right? But no food. Like, don't let rotting food be in your room. There is a boundary. Sure, you know what? It's your space. I'll allow you to keep it messy. And teenagers are messy, and they'll be cleaner later. Don't worry about them so much, but have some hard and fast boundaries that say, look, you can do that, but you cannot eat in there. And that is a boundary I'm going to hold. But you're right. Like, we don't want to fight over everything. And picking your battles is something we say. We use that term a lot, but it really is at the core of where you want to be parenting from, because you don't want to make an issue about everything. because that's exhausting for you and your child. And it's hard on their self-esteem as well. So here's what I want to ask you. I have a couple of like specific questions. So, what I've heard you say up to this point is for parents and kids, for not taking on a massive, massive project necessarily right away, but to you said to sort of chunk it, right? To take pieces, and instead of me gutting my entire kitchen, like, why don't I go to the drawer, that junk drawer that we all have, myself included, and clean that drawer out. Maybe one day, one task every single day is what you do, right? And you just keep it simple, right? I really like that. And being specific with your kids, like, go clean your room. What exactly are you asking me to do when you say go? Am I dusting? Am I vacuuming? Am I just picking my clothes up? Like, what does that mean, right? And so to be specific about that, and look, if your kids need it, I would recommend a checklist. Like, this is what cleaning your room means. Here's a little checklist, right? Yeah, I see you.
I was just gonna say, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I was gonna say, checklists are a big thing for me. And I think as parents, to not sound like a broken record, and you could do this with anything, obviously when my younger daughter struggles with ADHD and procedural processing. So if I tell her, go upstairs, brush your teeth, make your bed, it could be the same test. She literally doesn't have the ability to process it.
Yes.
It doesn't get, so I would get frustrated and then yell, and it became a whole, dumpster fire. So what I created was an upstairs checklist in the mornings and a downstairs checklist. So before you come down, make sure, have you done this, 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 this?
Mm-hmm.
And it saved me time and energy from repeating myself constantly and getting frustrated. And it also, in the same time, empowered her to be able to say, okay, this is what's expected of me. Am I going to do it without my mom having to nag me?
Well, and that's the thing about setting up your family values and your boundaries, is that you do that, and there's lots of process around this that I love to talk about, but essentially what you're doing is you're putting values in place, and everybody agrees in the family. So then when you want to hold a boundary, you say, look, remember, we all agreed that cleanliness is important to all of us, or we all agreed that working as a team together is important to us, and so this is important. So we'd like you to make your bed, and then if there is resistance, if there is other stuff going on where your child just can't get it done, then you go and say, okay, well, let's work this out. How come it's so hard for you to get your bed done every day? Or is it like your child, I have a child with ADHD as well, and it is hard for them to keep track of things. And you do sometimes have to repeat yourself, but you can be okay with that if you know that your child struggles. This isn't a time to shame them and criticize them and all of that stuff, right? So it's funny, Laurie, I was just on your podcast, you're on my podcast right now, and the funny thing is both you and I were sitting while the other was talking, like desperate to jump in. You and I could talk for hours.
Yeah, for sure.
We're going to keep it shorter than that, though. Okay, so here's what I wanted to ask you, though. At the end of the night, it's time to get to bed, and your kids have made a mess, and it's time to clean that up. Do you have a way to make that easier on kids and parents, just like at the end of the night?
Okay. So what I try to do from the get-go. So, okay, when my kids were really little, like I did like the cleanup song, right? Like again, like going back, like back in the days of Barney, like I'm totally dating myself. Like we're gonna, right? So like we would do that. But I, as a parent, think it's really important, because we live again in this society where we all are trying to cram as much in to our day as possible, which leaves little margin for us. So what I am a big proponent of is, well, first of all, I'm a proponent of kind of cleaning as you go. Doesn't have to be all the time, but like, and is this a perfect like science? Absolutely not.
No.
But before you take on an entirely new, like before you start playing with Play-Doh, we're going to clean up the Legos, or before we start playing this board game, we're going to put our Barbies away, right? Like you try to do some things. So again, because just like opening the mail every day as an adult, if you open it every day, it takes 2 minutes. If you let your mail stack up for a week, it's going to take you a lot longer to navigate through it.
Yeah.
And that's when the overwhelm and the procrastination, all that stuff is. So that's my first thing. But building in margin of what that playtime and that nighttime routine looks like, building that in of like, okay, so we're going to play, and then we build in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever that time looks like, that we're going to do that cleanup, as opposed to just throwing everything in this one big heaping mound, right? So if you know that it's the end of the day and your kids are going to bed at 8:00 and you're letting them play, maybe at 7:30 we say, okay, now we're going to do it. And you start the clock then. Just like when my kids were younger and they used to have friends over, like I always said, 15 minutes before that play date was over, okay, we're going to start cleaning up now. Because I always said, you know, you don't want, and most times the kids will oblige, because a lot of times what happens is if you don't do that, then you as the parent are left doing it, or your kid is overtired or overwhelmed. So if you build that in as like part of the equation, then it just becomes like
Part of your routine.
Part of the routine.
Well,
Exactly.
that's really great. So you're really good about that, about really being intentional, about noticing the time, about paying attention to those things so that you have the time, instead of screaming at your kids because there's 5 minutes left before we've got to get to bed. We've still got to brush our teeth. I still got to read you a story, and we've got to clean this all up. And, you know, all those things where things can go wrong and we start yelling, we start getting mad, we're impatient, all of those things. So really just taking note, like, okay, we've got to get to bed. Maybe you set an alarm for yourself, a timer for yourself, like it's 7, we got to get upstairs by 7:30. So let's get going, right? Or 7:30 to get upstairs for 8:00. So that's really good. So what I heard you say is cleaning as you go as much as possible. And if not, just really factor that time in, that, look, we've got to clean up. And so we're going to have the time for it. Now, how do you feel about parents helping them with it? Like, is this a job that kids should do on their own? Is it okay for me to help? Am I coddling my child too much by helping them? Tell me about that.
Okay. So I think, first of all, I think it's totally okay for parents to help your kids and to work with them. I think I am always, you know, preaching to adults, like, get an accountability partner, get a friend, you know, especially when it comes to something that isn't necessarily fun, like decluttering or organizing or doing stuff up. Now, that's not to say, it's to say to your parent, to your child as a parent, listen, you made this mess, you're going to clean it up. But I don't see there anything wrong if you have the bandwidth as a parent to help your kid, then to make it go quicker, and it's going to help them. But again, it's working with them, not doing it for them.
Yeah.
I think it's okay.
Big difference. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing that I just kind of wanted to add that kind of plays in with this is talking about the value proposition, right? And your motivation for wanting this might not be, your kid might be like, the messy toys on the floor doesn't bother me.
Mm-hmm.
But I always try to use language thinking back to when my kids were small, where I and my husband traveled a ton. And so I was like a single mom a lot, and I was working. And so I always said, listen, if you want to have, like, I want to be able to read to you before bed, or I want to be able to have time to watch that TV show or play a game or fill in the whatever it is with you. That's really important. And if you want to have time with me to do that, then we have to work together to make sure that you're doing what you need to do. So, you know, if I'm doing the dishes, you need to be cleaning up your toys, or you need to be brushing your teeth while I'm doing X. Because if we don't do that, then it becomes like a choices consequences. So if you're choosing not to do that, then that's going to take away time. And then the consequences, we're not going to be able to spend that one-on-one time together. So I think it's understanding that, wow, like, even though I don't care that the toys are like the toys on the floor might not bother your kid, but having that one-on-one time with mom or dad is important to them. And if they know that they're not going to get that, if as a result of the task or chore being done, that might be the value to get them to do it, even if they don't see the value in the bed making or whatever.
Well, and I think that's a really good point, because our kids will not see things the way we see them. They don't understand necessarily why it's so important for me to put away my toys when I'm just going to play with them tomorrow. Like, Mom, why do I need to? Right. So that's great. Like, what's the payoff for you? What's the payoff for me? And for parents to use this as some time to connect, and also some time to teach, right? You want to talk to your kids about what you're doing, why you're doing it, why it's important. So talk to them about that. And I do think, look, yes, you can say to your kids, nope, you've got to put them all away yourself. You've got to learn how to do this. Or you can go to them and you can say, hey, let's go together. Let's do this together, which, you know, sure, we've done lots of different things throughout the day for our kids, and we might not, like you say, have the bandwidth to do it. But when you're helping them, you are connecting with them, and, you know, it's okay to model kindness for them too, right? I think that's really important. So what about when you want to set up some chores for your kids? Do you ever talk about that, and sort of how to do that and how to get them to follow through?
Yeah. So there's actually, I do a bunch of talking about it, and not like to shameless plug my book, but I have a whole section about age appropriate chores or responsibilities for kid. And also on my website, I've got like a lot of free resources, including like a kid's responsibility checklist, and you can customize it. And so I think kids like jobs, like they like to feel empowered to do things. And some kids are more naturally inclined to want to help out in the kitchen, and some are more inclined to help outside with weeding. And other kids, like, I know one of my kids does not mind doing laundry, and another one doesn't mind taking out the trash, but for some reason they don't like walking the dog, right? So I will kind of give them like, here's what needs to get done, right? Here's our buffet of chores and tasks. And again, sometimes as a parent, I'm going to say, I need you to do this. And that's it. Like, I'm a parent. I'm saying, I need you to do X, and they may or may not like it. But there's a lot of things that, like, hey, listen, if you really don't mind putting, you know, your headphones in and listening to music and going out and weeding or mowing the lawn, then you go do that. And if you say, hey, I don't mind doing laundry, like, I allow my kids to kind of navigate, and as they get older, to say, hey, I'll do your laundry if you do this for me. Like, that's fine. It's getting done, and it's learning these life skills of working together and how you're going to do it. Mm-hmm. So I think there are age appropriate tasks again, but you can start early, you know, again, as early as, you know, having your kids put their stuff in you know, bringing the dish to the sink or the dishwasher. And one of the specific strategies that I encourage parents to do is make stuff accessible for kids. So even though you might want to have your plates in your cabinet up high, have a drawer or a shelf or something low where you could have those, you know, kid plates or kid bowls or kid stuff accessible, so that they can go and help set the table for at least their plate, right? That they can help put stuff away, you know, empower them and make things that you want within their reach to be within their reach, because they are little people. And it's I've seen people say, well, my kid can't do this because of this. So rework it. So yeah, so maybe your kitchen island wasn't designed to necessarily have plates and bowls, but you're going to put that there for the time being in this particular season of your life, because it makes them able to be part of the process.
Mm. You know, it's so true. Kids love a job. They love to be empowered, and they love to help out adults because they see us as the big, powerful people. And if they get to help us, I will never forget the look on my son's face when he was so little and he was helping my husband carry like a piece of fence lattice. And it was the sweetest little look on his face. He was so proud. And you're so right. I never thought of having plates and bowls low down where they could get it so that they could do their own place at the table. What a great idea. I love that. I love it so much. And look, if your kids are too young, that's when you're helping them. That's when you're teaching them to be independent, right? The whole point is we want to teach our kids to be independent, to be away from us at some time in their lives, which is the whole point, right? So giving them these skills is great. And I love that you're also looking at what do my kids like with my kids' different temperaments and personalities, you know, what would they like to do? Maybe one of them does want to zone out and just cut the grass. Like, okay, go for it, you know, and the other one is more hands-on, wants to cook dinner instead. So I really, really like that. And so really what you're saying, work with the kids that you've got, teach them, but also look, if you don't really know, you've got resources. Laurie Palau has got resources. And not only do you have a book, but you have a website. You've got, you know, you've got resources there too. And this is what we need, you know, like we've said over and over again, nobody tells us how to do this stuff, right? Nobody tells us how to really parent. Nobody tells us how to really keep a home, how to keep things organized and clutter free, and where should they go. You know, I have a hard time. I always worry about the environment. So I'm like, oh, I hope this is recyclable, and it's not. And then I have overflowing recycling bin. You know, I've got my own messages in my own head that, you know, stop me from doing things and continue the procrastination. So I really appreciate this conversation. I wonder, do you have any last words of wisdom that you can share with my audience?
Well, I'm sure I can come up with something, but I have a quick story if I have like a minute, just when you talked about the environmentally conscious. So this is a real life story, and it's great because it has to do with kids. So this is years ago. So I was working with a mom, and I happened to know the mom. I know the child, and she had her son at the time was probably about 8 or 10. And I knew him. And she said, I was helping her with her stuff. And she said, you know, I'm really struggling because my son has this bag of stuffed animals. They'd gone through a move, and there was literally like a contractor garbage bag of stuffed animals that was sitting in the basement. And she's like, he will not let me get rid of them. I don't know what to do. Maybe you can work with him. And I said, absolutely. So he happened to be there one day when he came home from school. And so I was chatting with him, and I said, talk to me about these stuffed animals. Cause obviously, and I've kids who like love stuffed animals and name them, and they all have personality. So like, I get that. Mm-hmm. So I said, they're in the basement. So you're not enjoying them. You're not snuggling with them. You're not sleeping with them. Why can we not get rid of them? Tell me what's going on with you. And he looked at me and he said, well, I don't want them to end up in a landfill. That's just not going to be like, that's just not good for the environment. And I said, well, what if there was a place that what if I were to tell you that I could donate these to the animal shelter for the animals that come in, or I could donate them to the local police department for, you know, kids that need a stuffed animal. Like, I gave them another home so that they would not end up in a landfill. And he's like, yeah, that'd be great. So I said, here's your homework. I said, I gave him a bin, and I said, you could fill up this bin with as many stuffed animals that you want to keep. It wasn't a huge bin, but it was like a sizable bin. I said, you could fill up as much as it fills in here, and everything else is going to get donated. Okay, agreed? And he said, sure, no problem. I came back the following week, and there were 3 stuffed animals in his bin. And I'm thinking, he didn't do it. He got, you know, look at our Clutter Pitfalls. He got distracted or overwhelmed or whatever. So he came home from school, and I was like, did you know, what happened, bud? Like, we didn't get a chance to do it. And he goes, no, I did it. And I said, there's only 3 stuffed animals in there. And he goes, yeah, those are really the only ones that really matter to me. The rest don't matter. As long as we can donate them to another place, then I'm fine with it. And all it did, and I'm not a miracle worker, but all I did was engage in a conversation.
Yeah.
And I think communication is really the key of understanding what the stronghold is.
Yeah.
And in that particular case, he felt empowered. No one forced him. There was no threatening. There was no yelling. Now, granted, obviously, when you have a third party, your kids are always better listeners than to your parents.
Sure.
But just by saying, giving them that solution and allowing them to be part of the process, the kid walked away with 3 stuffed animals that didn't even need a bed. So it was just a great, and I tell this story all the time because it's so relevant. And I think a lot of times we don't want to be wasteful. We are, we talk about guilt as one of the clutter pitfalls, and it can apply in so many different areas. I mean, I've done episodes just about guilt, but I think it's so important to look at that. So I guess kind of my parting words is allow your kids to have some skin in the game. Once they have some skin in the game, then they start to realize the value, and they also start to see the time it takes to do this. And maybe they will think twice about taking every toy out if they know that they have to put it back, or holding on and realizing that if I, if my room isn't super cluttered with stuff, I can actually enjoy the stuff that I have in here. So just allowing them to kind of own that and really see what is it that I want really. And, I think they don't know. So give them the language.
Yeah. Wow. That's really good. Skin in the game is really good. And as kids get older, I think it's important that they have more skin in the game too. So, so that's really great. I think, what you just said is really at the core of what I teach. And that is not to look at the surface of what's going on, but to go under and say, okay, let's have a conversation about it. How come this is going on? And that's what you did. And you listened for understanding, and you said, okay, how can we create a win-win? That's what I'm all about. That's what this is all about. And so you've just demonstrated this in a cleaning or a decluttering. And I think that's a really important, way to tie this together, is that as humans, we just need to communicate with each other. We need to connect with each other so that we can figure out what's going on. As humans, we're messy, inside and out, right? And so it's like we've all got a reason for why we do things that we do. And so just understanding it allows us to show up with more empathy and compassion for the other person as well.
Absolutely. And it's fluid, right? This is a practice. This is something that's ongoing. I mean, and I say this to people all the time, I wish I could say you organize something once, it's one and done, but it's just like exercise or eating right or anything else that we do, right? And it's as we go through seasons of life, right now, as the time of this recording, we're under quarantine. So we have a lot more stuff in our house that we're accessing on a regular basis. So you probably have more stuff on your counters than you would normally or there's more toys out because the kids are home 24 hours a day. So we have to give ourselves permission that there are going to be seasons and times in our lives where clutter is just going to be a byproduct of where we are, but it doesn't mean that that's a permanent state of mind.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. That's a beautiful place to end. Thank you for that. Thank you for your wise words, for your help, for your support, and all of your details will be in the show notes. Again, you have a podcast called This Organized Life. Your book is called Hot Mess, A Practical Guide to Getting Organized. Laurie Palau, you are awesome. Thank you for being here. I so appreciate you.
Well, thanks. I appreciate you too.
Thank you for listening to this edition of my podcast, Parenting Our Future. I'm parent coach Robbin McManne, and if you're enjoying this podcast, please share it with someone who you think might also need to hear this message. And don't forget to subscribe, and if you like my work, I would be grateful if you gave me a 5-star rating. For those of you who like my content and want more, visit me at yellingcurebook.com to get your copy of my book and to find other resources to help you. Until next time, I am wishing you and your family peace and connection.